My name is Robert Carlin. I was a U.S. government employee for many years. I started working on Korea almost 50 years ago. I've been to North Korea several times, and now I'm in sweet retirement.
Have you had a chance to look at the military parade that took place a week ago?
I did.
What was it feeling like? What impressed the most?
I was actually in Korea for the parade in 2017. I was right down on the street. And so I was comparing it to that. This one was a lot more theatrical. The videography, is that the word? Was amazing, it seems to me. I mean, I've told people if they can fight a war like they can choreograph a parade, it's going to be problems. If only they could use all that talent, in their civilian economy, it would also be tremendous. The other thing I noticed, the parade I saw was the military part of it was followed by a civilian economic part. There were floats on the economy, people walking by, the leader with slogans about the economy. I don't think they had that this time, which made me question, although it was at night and it was very cold, and so maybe they didn't want that. And then, of course, the daughter was so prominent in the photographs, although I was very interested that there was only one time she went forward to stand next to her father, and that was during the fireworks and the air show. Otherwise, she was back up sitting. I thought at least she'd be down a couple of times, but I think they know what they're doing. They've already scripted this thing pretty carefully.
What did they try to signify with his daughter up on the stage?
Yeah.
Showing up? Does that mean that she's the one?
People are speculating all over the map on this. I saw your government came out recently and said, no, they don't think so. And especially they said because it's primarily, a male society. I don't believe that. I think if Kim Jong-un wants to change things, he'll do it. I just don't know why you would bring somebody out this early. I mean, he was groomed for a long time behind the scenes. So why, if she is the one, and I don't know, but if she is, why have they decided to bring her out at such an early age? What are they thinking? And I don't have an answer to that. I really don't understand.
At a conference in Japan, you mentioned back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, the leader over there is doing okay, and also the economy is getting better. The people are doing fine up there. After 5 years, after watching this parade, I mean, you said theoretical, but
yeah.
Are we on the same page that your impression back then is still valid now?
It's a very different slice of the picture. In 2017, I was in Pyongyang. I could see activity. I could compare. My first visit was there in 1996, in the leading edge of the famine. Pyongyang was a empty, quiet, sad city in those days.
Was it right after the Kim Jong-un's passed?
No, 1996.
Yes.
It was after. It was 2 years after Kim Il-sung died.
Kim Il-sung, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kim Jong-un was fairly new, right? But it was very strange. From 96 to 2017 is this enormous change. Not only just buildings, but activity on the street, commerce, traffic, people's dress, everything was different. My last visit there was 2017, so I honestly can't tell you what the comparison is. And a nighttime parade is not enough. More new buildings going up. That's all we know from the outside. So I couldn't say.
I see. Well, Dr. Hacker mentioned the biggest, the most striking hinge point was back in 19 at Hanoi, as you already read this book.
Right.
Do you agree? And also, what do you think went wrong, and what could have been done by the Trump administration, or the misunderstanding, if there's any misunderstanding of Mr. Kim up there in North? What went wrong?
I was in a lot of negotiations, and I can tell you that unless you're in the room, it's very difficult to judge. And so I have to be very careful. I can only judge on the basis of public statements and the analysis I did of the Kim-Trump letters, which seems to me fairly revealing. If you look at Singapore, the Singapore statement, which was a very good beginning. I know it got criticized, but as far as I was concerned, it was a first step, an important first step, and could be built on, which is what I thought they would do in Hanoi. I don't think President Trump and his team was capable of sustaining what they put in motion. It's a tragedy. You know, they're smart people and they have ideas, but they just didn't understand how to make something work and keep working with the North Koreans. My view, Sig's view is as well, the offer that Kim put on the table, which was to freeze Yongbyon, was very significant. And rather than simply reject it, or reject it quite so quickly, it seems to me that should have been examined and probed, and they should have pulled on the threads and let Kim Jong-un, if he possibly could, back away. Not right away, because for some reason he seemed to come into the talks thinking his deal would be accepted, and it wasn't, and it shocked him, apparently. They needed more time. And for the president to leave quite so abruptly like that seemed to me not a good negotiating tactic.
Now, let's say back in 1950 was 100% tension level. Now, the South Korean leader, President Yoon, is mentioning the strategic nuclear weapon. What could be the number of tension compared to back in 1950 now? If we say that was 100%
right
back then.
Well, I don't think it's that high. But it's very brittle, right? Something could go wrong, which could, if you have a pool of gasoline in your basement, you may be able to live with that for years until someone drops a match into it. So I think we have a pool of gasoline here. We have to be both sides have to be very, very careful.
Now we talk about peace. When do you think, looking back, the most peaceful time throughout the peninsula? Would you say in the beginning of the agreed framework?
Absolutely. Not only the beginning, we kept things peaceful pretty consistently all the way through. There were incidents, but the fact was it was much easier to resolve those, contain them and resolve them, because you had the agreed framework as an overarching umbrella. People talk about the nuclear umbrella. We had a different type of umbrella, which helped contain bad things from happening. That's gone, totally gone. In 2001, 2002, it disappeared, it seems to me.
Dr. Hacker also mentioned that in his book that North Korea is always trying to juggle things. He mentioned that the two-track approach, one side diplomacy, the other side nuclear arsenal. Does that mean the North has been lying all the way, all the time, and hiding something behind the curtain?
I was afraid that people would interpret it that way. I'm glad you raised that. He'll be able to answer that as well. My view is what he meant was, and what we saw was, the North Koreans, in 1990, Kim Il-sung made a very important decision. He wanted normal relations with the United States, and he wanted the United States to act as a buffer and even a protector against China and Russia, which at that point had become very hostile. But the North Koreans are very aware of how small and weak they are. So they can never admit it or appear that way. They can't appear. Small countries have different ways of dealing with big countries. They can either roll over and say, scratch my stomach, or they can be like porcupines. Even though they want the big country to be helpful, they don't want to be seen as being inviting them too much. So all along the way, the North Koreans would indicate to the Americans that they wanted to improve things, and yet when they saw the Americans not moving toward them in the right way or backing away, the natural instinct was to get tough and do something nasty. Seg will point out, they invited him several times to see their nuclear program. That wasn't a threat. That was an invitation to the Americans. See, we're getting stronger. Are you sure you wouldn't like to talk to us? Well, it didn't happen. Those are the hinge points. That's changed. I'm afraid after Hanoi, that's completely changed. And they no longer are interested in that sort of relationship with the Americans, maybe because they think it's impossible. It won't work. And China is so much stronger now. And if you have that sort of a strong neighbor and getting stronger at all the time, it's very difficult to decide that you're going to give them the cold shoulder. So I think there's a new geostrategic arithmetic at work, and we may have lost an opportunity.
Did the change of the leadership in the South played any role in terms of denuclearization, also taking care of, or the management of the nuclear arsenal in the North?
You mean over the years?
Yes.
There were a number of places where it either did or could have. Certainly Kim Dae-jung's meeting right in the middle of, in fact, it was in June 2000, right?
Right.
October 2000 is when Kim Jong-il sent his number 2 military advisor to Washington. Then Madeleine Albright went to Pyongyang. That was a big breakthrough. And in part, that was one of the spillover effects of the Kim summit in June. The summit that took place in November of, 2007? Yeah. Should have led to positive things, it seems to me. You had the Philharmonic go right after that, which, again, potentially was a door that could have been opened. And unfortunately, South Korean politics went the other way. You got a fairly conservative president who crumpled up and threw in the trash all the agreements. And so the North Koreans reacted as you might expect, although subsequently, not that many years later, Kim Jong-il wanted to have a summit with Lee Myung-bak and even made that proposal. Didn't come to fruition, unfortunately. But so again, the North Koreans were probing. And don't forget, Kim Jong-il had a stroke. They were in a weak position. They needed a peaceful external environment to make sure that the succession would go well. So I think we may have lost an opportunity there to smooth things out. So the answer is yes. And also, certainly President Moon. The North Koreans knew that if they were going to get to the Americans, they needed a positive momentum with South Korea. And President Moon was certainly open to that and had ways of trying to make it even more positive. But once things turned bad with the Americans, the North Koreans didn't have any use for the South Koreans because that's the whole purpose of the game, you know.
Do you see any big changes after we have new president coming into office? It's been about a year or something.
Not quite, yeah.
Not quite yet.
The rhetoric has gotten pretty ugly, both ways. And think about it, that when the North Korean drones went across the line, obvious violation of the armistice agreement, pretty serious, although not potential. Well, it wasn't going to lead to a war. It was just raising tensions. The South Korean side sent drones back across. That's a violation of the armistice agreement. Serious. The military demarcation line is essentially the only part of the armistice that still exists. Everything else has gone away. It's absolutely crucial that that be protected, it seems to me. And when the North Koreans violate it, which they might, it needs to be protected by the South Korean side, it seems to me. So that was a little bit of a shock to me and a danger sign. I hope we'll get back to where we should be on the MDL.
Now we have new Democrat in the office, in the Oval Office. It's been quite a while. It's been 2 years, right?
That's right.
Can you assess their approach to North Korea's nuclear arsenal?
Again, since I'm not on the inside, all I can do is judge it from the outside. I know they keep saying that they have tried over and over again to contact the North Koreans and there hasn't been an answer. So that leaves two possibilities. One, what they've been putting in their messages is just not interesting to the North Koreans. It's either they're phrased the wrong way or it doesn't have any concrete proposals, and I don't really know. Maybe it's brilliant stuff, maybe it's not quite right. The other problem, though, is the change in Pyongyang. You know, I mentioned that maybe the North Koreans are no longer interested in what Kim Il-sung had been aiming for, which was a strategic relationship with the United States. If they're not interested in that anymore, then in Pyongyang, when you get a letter from the Americans saying, we want to meet with you, you say to yourself, why? What are we going to get out of this, right now? The Americans make it plain in public. The number one priority is denuclearization. The North Koreans don't want to talk about denuclearization. That's a non-starter. That's going to be a very boring meeting. So it may mean they need to see something else coming from the Americans. And even then, I don't think it would be as fruitful a negotiations as people in D.C. hope. But it's the reality. The train has left the station.
So maybe it's time for the North cooking something in their lab instead of getting out on the table, talking about diplomacy, exchanging something, visiting. So it's time for them to working on their laboratory instead of diplomacy. As long as the Dr. Hacker mentioned about these two tracks.
You mean doing more? Well, what did they show us in the parade? This monster missile. I mean, enormous. When is that going to go up? So yeah, they may be cooking something. I heard a theory that someone said, well, when Kim has finished launching and they shut down the reactor to refuel it, maybe they'll be ready to talk. We saw that scenario in 2017. Kim was preparing to pivot to diplomacy, after he finished the missile and nuclear programs. That's what he did. I don't see that happening this time, I'm afraid. I hope it happens, but so far there's no signals that that's what he's thinking of.
To the best of your knowledge and understanding, and also all the colleagues around you, do you 100% think that they are capable of sending or launching ICBM with the nuclear warhead, targeting the U.S. continent?
You asked Dr. Hecker that. I don't know. I'm not a missile guy. Seriously. Yeah. What we do know is that they've had 6 nuclear tests and that they know how to explode a nuclear weapon. And that they have learned every time they've had a test something new about the configuration and the package, all that stuff. So if they're not capable yet, they're on the road.
I see.
That's what I think.
But they're trying to show the world that they are close to being able to launch something, targeting whatever they want to.
It sure looks that way. Yeah.
Now, I understand you met a lot of government officials in the South and North. To you, do they seem to believe that they could possibly be reunited someday later?
I never felt that vibration off of either side. It may be something that they deeply wish for, but it's certainly not in their near term or even their midterm view of what the world is going to be like.
Okay.
You know, the North Koreans changed the definition of reunification many years ago, which makes it easier for them in some sense. It used to be territorial, right?
Okay.
One big country under North Korea. Beginning in the 1980s, they slowly changed that so that they could accept the ROK as a legitimate negotiating partner.
I see.
And as a government, not as a sovereign state, but as a government with which they had to deal. That allows them to settle for some concept of reunification, which is far less than they used to aim for.
Did the same thing go for the South Korean government?
I don't.
Or do they still call them a local state?
북한, they still say, you know, they still refer to the northern, whatever the derogatory term is. So, and that's more these days even than there used to be. But that's just part of the rhetoric that's gotten ugly in the last couple of years.
I see. Well, also that leads us to another question. The reunification of the peninsula has to do anything with the nuclear arsenal. Some people say, well, we'll be united pretty soon in the near future. So why is the problem for the North to develop the nuclear arsenal?
That's interesting.
It'll be ours.
Yeah.
Is that totally invalid or not valid concept? It almost sounds ridiculous.
Well, you know, when the Soviet Union fell and there were several countries, Kazakhstan, even Ukraine, who had Soviet nuclear weapons in their territories, and they were theirs in a sense. They didn't know how to use them, but they were theirs. So you can imagine a scenario, I'm afraid, where the North Korean nuclear arsenal becomes a Korean nuclear arsenal. Seems to me that would not be good. And there'd be a lot of pressure on South Korea to give those up, as Ukraine did.
Right. And also, back to President Yoon's remark, strategic nuclear weapon. You mentioned that in 38 North, your article said it is not viable, and also it's not permissible in the international society. Again, why it's not possible, and also why do you think that Mr. Yoon mentioned that the strategic nuclear weapon, even though their team know that it's not possible?
If I understood what President Yoon was saying and doing on virtually anything, I'd probably be worth $1 billion. That I don't know. What I do know is I don't think people understand by becoming a nuclear weapon state, North Korea can't be part of the non-proliferation treaty. It has to leave the treaty. Leaving the treaty is a big deal internationally. There will probably be sanctions on the part of the United States. The economic consequences will be pretty severe. People have to put up with a lot of heartache if they do that. And the question is, will they be any safer? That's what Sig Hecker's point is, that you won't be any safer. And in fact, you might be more of a target. So I remember years ago, South Korean friend saying, well, North Korea has nuclear weapons, why can't we? It's a very simple, logical,
approach.
It's sort of, But when you peel away the layers, it seems to me you get down to what's going to be a very painful realization that is not so simple.
I see. Now, do you still have friends up there in the north? Of course, you have a lot of friends in the south. Do you still call them, getting information, asking questions?
Where, in the south or the north?
Both.
The north, the window has closed, the curtains have dropped. They don't have anything to do with any Americans.
It's been that way like several years.
Since 2019.
I see.
They're polite. They continue to be polite. I mean, they're not rough or nasty about it, but the answer is we can't talk to you, we can't see you, we can't do it. So that's a big problem. I don't know why the North Koreans have done that. Beginning in 2019, also, they started cutting off all sorts of insights. Nodang Shinmun started dropping foreign affairs articles. The foreign ministries cut back on the number and types of statements it issued. So we have less and less insight into what they're thinking. They may think that the leadership may think that's good. I think it's a mistake in the long run on their part. Because if people don't know what they're thinking and doing, the worst case assumptions can run rampant, right? And it's very hard to say, but wait a minute, look at, that's not real. You can't do that anymore. So that's where we're stuck right now. And if they open up and they start sending more delegations overseas, maybe we'll start getting a little bit better peep under the curtain.
You think it'll happen soon because they already secured the ICBM, also nuclear arsenal and everything? There are rumors that in the next couple of months they'll maybe start sending delegations out or things like that. We had the same last year, so I'll just wait and see. I hope it's true, but we'll have to see. So I guess your old friends over there in the State Department are kind of having a hard time analyzing what they are doing up there in that.
Yeah, they do. They do have a hard time. Some of them few of them are very, very good at what they do, but it's not easy. One other thing, just if I may. The North Koreans are losing the team that used to engage the Americans, who understood the Americans, who understood how to negotiate with the Americans, who understood how to get to yes.
You're talking about the team that worked on
agreed framework, right. And for a while, a lot of them were being elevated. They were getting promotions, I mean, Choi Soon-hee is the foreign minister. Young-ho was the foreign minister. So they didn't suffer from that experience. The Americans didn't do so well. The American team started thinning out. Now the American team, the experienced American team, is old, retired. That's not to say that a new team couldn't learn. Of course they can, but there's a learning curve. It takes time, and you need the political environment in the United States. You need the president to say, essentially, to his subordinates, I want this fixed. I don't want a crisis on the peninsula while I am president. Well, that hasn't happened. Hasn't happened since, I don't think it really has happened seriously since 2001. And that's been a problem.
Some people might say, well, young generation coming up and taking the office and totally refreshed, is starting a new agreement.
Great, that would be wonderful. New, fresh ideas and
right.
On both sides. Okay, I wouldn't criticize it if it happened. But I don't know how many more years I have to wait. That's the problem.
I see.
When I started working on North Korea in 1974, I never imagined Korea wouldn't be reunified by this time. North Korea was so much weaker. South Korea was so much stronger. It really looked like the tides were running. It didn't happen. And it's very important that people go back and look at it and try to figure out what those mistakes were, what the strengths of the North Koreans were that they could play so skillfully. And is there still a chance we can get things to move that way? I doubt it, but maybe.
Was there like a personal expectation and analysis, or is it just governmental official expectation?
No, it was just my sense looking at things, 50 years, okay. 50 years before 1974 was 1924. Look at how much the world changed from 1924 to so why are we still stuck on the peninsula in that same way? Why are we still bound by the iron chains of decisions that were made in 1945 on splitting the peninsula into two? That has weighed down everybody's policy in Northeast Asia. And it's very hard for anybody to really think big thoughts about the future as long as this problem continues to weigh us down, it seems to me.
Well, people say simply there are too many interests from too many countries involved. If it is just North and South, and all the good things are happening, it would have been much easier. But still, after, like you said, 70 years after the war,
right,
there's still interest, live and kicking.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the, so how do you turn that into something positive? No, for a while, nobody wanted North Korea to collapse.
You don't believe they will collapse?
Well, now I don't. There was a time when people thought they might. Their economy was going downhill. They were suffering all sorts of things. And so, Japan didn't want them to collapse. They don't want all these refugees streaming in. South Korea didn't want them to collapse. You used to go to the basement of the Lotte Hotel, which was filled with expensive goods. You think those people want to give that up to sacrifice for their poor cousins up north? So there are a lot of reasons, and so now we're in unfortunately, a new, different situation where the North Koreans are much stronger than they were. People hope that the economy is weak, but they've proven over and over again that they can muddle through hard times and come to something better.
I see. Now, I'm not sure if the administration the Washington is going to be changed, or they keep on wanting this Democrat in the office. Nobody knows, right? But do you think it'll help?
A new administration.
Right. Would that change anything?
It would be unusual if it did, because when a new administration comes in, they always need to do a review, right? And they usually ask the same people who have been advising all the wrong things before, and so they come up with this wrong answer all over again. The only review that was ever useful was Bill Perry's review. Mm. That was intellectually honest, thorough, and he's such a wonderful intellect that was a good review. Subsequently, as far as I'm concerned, the reviews have been negative. I once told when I was in the State Department, and I this must have been in 2001 after George Bush came in. I said, this policy just doesn't make any sense. They said, well, there was a review, wasn't there? And I said, the review was a joke. And they said to me, what? I said, you heard me. It was a farce. It wasn't real. They already knew what the answer was before they started the review. Well, that's ridiculous. Maybe the Biden review was better. I hope it was. Okay. But 2 years later, it hasn't worked. So it's time to think again, it seems.
I think you're referring to Rumsfeld, Cheney, and John Bolton. You said it's a joke, but I think that some of the conservative side, they strongly believe that their government needs a strong diplomatic power and also a big staff when it comes to South Asian countries, North Korea, nuclear arsenal. Do you totally don't agree with them or their approach?
I totally don't agree with them. Look at Mike Pompeo's recent book. There's a core of good thought in what they're trying to accomplish and how they were going to accomplish. And then the rest of it is ridiculous, how they think they were going to handle it. They were going to make sure the North Koreans just did what they wanted. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And so that's the problem. People don't understand that we just can't snap our fingers and make the world sit up and take notice, especially with the North Koreans.
Before and after this, the agreed framework, as far as you remember, I mean, I wish wouldn't happen, and also wouldn't happen in the Washington office. Have they ever thought of committing any military action against the North Korea or Yongbyon or any type of facilities over there?
Well, sure. In June of 1994, when that's when things were very tough.
I see.
That's when, at least the Americans, well, Bill Perry will tell you, the Americans were seriously looking at plans for a strike on Yongbyon. I've never been exactly clear how close they were, but he seems to think it was quite serious. But what the Americans didn't understand was, even before we got to that point, the North Koreans were already starting to back away and try to get back to dialogue. Mm. And we weren't listening. I see. If it hadn't been for Jimmy Carter, it might have gone too far. But God smiled on us and sent Jimmy Carter in, and it diffused it right away. Since then, I know some people think that during the Trump years, it got that tense. My view was, again, the Americans might miscalculate. The North Koreans were not about to step too far, and almost maybe thought the Americans were bluffing. I'm not quite sure.
And the question is, how do we convince the people in Washington?
If I knew the answer to that, I would do it. No, it's too complicated. And people come to office with assumptions about North Korea with common wisdom. That's wrong, but that's what they believe. They're constantly reinforced by the media and opinion makers who don't know what they're talking about. And the North Koreans frequently don't help, to be honest. So I don't know the answer to that. A new president, maybe, I can think of some Republicans who might look at a different approach. But again, the South Koreans will be tugging at them, right? Your foreign minister says there can be no real peace as long as North Korea has nuclear weapons. Well, then there can be no real peace.
That's why I'm bringing this question. After all these 30 years, back then everything was possible. You visit them, talk to them, but now look at this.
Absolutely.
ICBM is flying over there.
Right.
No talks.
Right.
We don't have that much intel. What is going on? What are they cooking in the north?
Right.
Who knows what will happen if somebody decide to advise that the military action or the internal target somewhere in the Yongbyon would be the only solution here. I mean, the president might say, why not?
I don't get the feeling that would happen here. Although let's say they launch an ICBM at full range into the Pacific and explode a atmospheric nuclear weapon to prove they have it. Look at how Washington fell apart with a Chinese balloon, for heaven's sake. Right? So I don't really know what would happen if the North Koreans did something like that. That worries me more than a seventh nuclear test. And I hope to gosh they don't try something like that.